Hello, my name is Marta Jorba, and I'm from Pompeu Fabra University in Barcelona. And I'm going to present the talk Intersectionality as Emergence, which is joint work with Dan López de Sá from ICREA and University of Barcelona. The plan for the talk is the following. We will begin by introducing the notion of intersectionality, and then the main ingredients of our account, of our proposal, which are the general frame and what we call the possible non-additivity, then the notion of emergence and experience in context. After that, I will present the view of the emergence of intersectional experiences. We will add something on the emergence of single category experiences, and we will address what has been called the etc. problem. Finally, we end highlighting the virtues of that we believe that our view has, which are metaphysical neutrality, explanatory flexibility, methodological openness. And we finalize with some conclusions. So we claim, firstly, that intersectionality can be fruitfully understood as a general metaphysical frame where certain specific non-additive relations can take place. And secondly, that the emergence of experience in context of discrimination and privilege provides a useful way to articulate such a frame. And during this talk, we will try to disentangle the notions involved in this claim. As a way of introducing the notion, as you probably know, the term intersectionality was coined in a text in print, firstly by Kimberlé Crenshaw, the Black feminist legal scholar in 1989, where she analyzes the case of 5 Black women who brought suit against the firm General Motors, alleging that they were discriminated by the employer's seniority system. So her main claim was that they were not hired, the group of Black women, but then the court answered to this kind of suit, saying that indeed General Motors had hired women, and this was respecting the sex anti-discrimination law. The only fact it was that they were white women, and in fact, according to the race anti-discrimination law, the firm was also within the law because Black men had been hired during that period. The only issues were that they were men, but not Black women. So the framework of the anti-discrimination law regarding sex and regarding gender was not considering the intersection of those categories when it came to the case of Black women. So this left the group of Black women unprotected by these laws. And after analyzing this case, Kimberlé Crenshaw concludes, and this is the quote that you have in the slide, that problems of exclusion cannot be solved simply by including Black women within an already established analytical structure. Because the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism, any analysis that does not take intersectionality into account cannot sufficiently address the particular manner in which Black women are subordinated. And the sentence in bold will be important for our account, the idea that the intersectional experience is greater than the sum of racism and sexism, because this is precisely what our notion of emergence will try to capture. In a recent special issue in the journal Science, Cho, Crenshaw, and McCall, 3 of the main intersectionality scholars, say that as intersectionality has traveled, questions have been raised regarding a number of issues, and they enumerate these issues in which we think and that summarize the main ideas involved in intersectionality research. One is the additive and autonomous versus interactive and mutually constituting nature of the race, gender, class, sexuality, nation nexus. Then the eponymous, etc. problem, that is, the number of categories and kinds of subjects, privileged or subordinate, stipulated or implied by an intersectional approach. And finally, the static and fixed versus the dynamic and contextual orientation of intersectional research. And this is very useful because in our account, we will try to address these main issues and give specific answers to these important ideas and questions. So first of all, we suggest to conceive intersectionality as a general metaphysical frame where specific claims to the effect that experiences of discrimination of Black women, among others, can be fruitfully formulated and examined. So this general metaphysical frame includes both additive relations and non-additive relations. So what we claim is that non-additivity, or the fact that experience may interact in a non-additive way, is a possibility of the framework. It's not an obligation, it's not a requirement of the framework, in contrast with some other views of intersectionality. And we further claim that there might be different kinds of relations or interaction between social categories, such as the intensification among them or mitigation. So the effects of one social category can intensify or can mitigate the effects of another category, as we will see. So as for the ingredients of the view, consider this example of a non-additive case. So poor women may have different obstacles than rich women to find ways to have access to abortion techniques in countries where it is forbidden. In this case, class discrimination intensifies the discrimination suffered by gender, and it is a case in which social categories contribute to a different configuration of discrimination. So intensification cannot be read in an additive way, in a way in which the fact that someone is a woman and the fact that someone is poor kind of sum up, or it's related in an additive way, so that the result is that they cannot doubly do something. It's just that the way these two categories, the effects of these two categories are related, is contributes to a different configuration of discrimination. This is different from cases that are put forward by Bauleck, for example, in the case of the household income of Black lesbian women, in which in some cases it is clear that the resulting income of this group compared to other groups is the result of an additive relation. And our framework kind of makes room for these additive cases, but also, and interestingly, for the non-additive cases, which are the ones that are highlighted by Crenshaw and by all these other intersectional scholars. Then we encounter this notion of emergence, which we think is the main one of the main notions in our account. And we understand emergence with this notion of dependence of the whole on the different parts or components. So on the dependence of the intersectional experience out of the components, the single category components, and that this resulting experience, intersectional experience, has certain autonomy, and in particular explanatory autonomy. So it is autonomous with respect to the kind of explanations that we can build with this category. And this, we believe that we draw this analogy with the traditional example of life, in which this is a notion that depends on kind of prior components and more basic components, but that has certain explanatory autonomy. Our variety of emergence, importantly, is a kind of quick emergence in the sense that it is compatible with physicalism. It is also the emergence of properties and not particulars, and this may alleviate some philosophers' worry regarding the ontology of our view. And it also bypasses issues of irreducibility. So we kind of remain neutral with respect to those complicated issues of irreducibility, and we believe it is enough to present this notion as a quick emergence of properties. And the paradigm are those properties posed by the special sciences, and as examples, as we were saying with life, or other biological properties, in which they depend from more basic features, but they still have certain autonomy. The second main notion is that notion of experience in context, and we understand experience in a broad sense. So our primary focus is on the experience of discrimination and privilege. And these experiences, this is a social meaning, if you want, of experience, and may include phenomenological and psychological aspects, but crucially, it did not, and we do not believe that this sense of experience reduces to them. So when we talk about experiences, we include the sense of what it is like to undergo a certain experience or the psychological aspects, but experience goes beyond that and includes all these different social situations of discrimination and privilege. Then directly to the formulation of the view, the emergent account says that whenever society arranges itself as to make a category relevant with respect to discrimination and privilege, the corresponding experience emerges. And with this experience, with this single experience, all its intersectional experiences. And this overall makes non-additive interactions possible. So as examples, so we have had traditionally in the history of intersectionality, or the origin in the US was with the experiences of Black women, but we, of course, do not, our account does not reduce to that group, but also we could include all those other intersectional experiences like lesbian women, Black lesbian women, and so on. But then these are already intersectional experiences and that are relevant and that has been historically relevant because they have been socially relevant with respect to discrimination and privilege. But there have been other categories like experiences related to in vitro fertilization procedures, for example, that start to exist at a certain point in history due to technological development. And those experiences, when they when people are kind of embracing those kind of categories or those kinds of positions, face certain kind of discriminations, these experiences emerge, and with them all these other intersectional experiences. So the experience of in vitro fertilization, so the experience of being or undergoing a process of in vitro fertilization intersects with being a lesbian woman or with being a Black lesbian woman and so on. But then there are other kinds of categories, like, for example, being lefty, that is sleeping on one's left, that example put forward by Nussbaum, in which the experience of being lefty has not emerged. So there are no experience of being lefty in our sense, because being lefty has not been a kind of category for which society arranges in a way to provide certain privileges or to discriminate against this kind of people. So, but we are open to the fact that they might emerge. So there might be a future world or a possible world in which this experience of being lefty are socially relevant in our sense, related to discrimination and privilege, and so emerge and intersect with all these other experiences of relevant social categories. Now, with respect to the etc. problem, remember from Crenshaw and McCall introduction to the special issue, they called the etc. problem after Butler's coinage of the term, when she says that there's this embarrassing etc. in attempts to define identity. And Butler's problem is a problem of identity, but applied to intersectionality, these authors ask, and this has been also a very kind of hot question, which are the relevant intersections to consider in an intersectional analysis. So in our frame, and this has relation to what I was just saying, which intersections are relevant are those that emerge and that have emerged because of the social dynamics. And then the further question is, how do they in fact interact? And this is an empirical question. We have to see empirically and analyze which are the kinds of relations among these categories that have emerged. And it might be additive or not, depending on the context. But our response to which are the relevant intersections is that this is to be given by the social dynamics. And that in fact, we believe that this might not be a very negative problem, but it's just a symptom of the complexity of intersectionality, that we should be open to all sorts of new experiences emerging if it's relevant regarding the social dynamics. Then finally, we believe that our account has certain virtues of metaphysical neutrality, explanatory flexibility, and methodological openness, which I will briefly present. First of all, regarding metaphysical neutrality, we say that by focusing on experiences rather than on the underlying categories, so the experience of Black woman, for example, and not the category Black woman, the frame is immune to controversies regarding the metaphysical nature of such categories. So, as I was saying, we focus on the experience of Black women rather than category of Black women itself. And this is in contrast with some views on the literature like Maria Lugones or Anne Gehry or Sarah Bernstein recently, in which what they claim is that intersectionality mutually constitutes the categories themselves. And in our view, this might carry kind of further problems, and we regard this metaphysical neutrality as a virtue of the view. And this is done by kind of this distinction and separating experiences from categories and applying all this intersectional framework to the emergence notion to the concept of experience and not categories. So the intersectional insight regarding Black women would still be well taken, regardless of the specific constructs of the underlying categories of race and gender, as I was saying. And this is similarly so for the intersectional insight regarding sexual orientation, class, disability, and other categories. Regarding the second virtue, we believe that the epistemic consequences of emergence are appropriately unified and structured. So they allow that the intersectional experience may be in some context the most explanatory relevant, given certain purposes at hand, without implausibly requiring that it be always the case. And this is in contrast again with a recent proposal by Sarah Bernstein, in which she says that the intersectional experience, the intersectional category, for example, Black woman, this two-placed category, this kind of double category has certain explanatory priority. So we believe that if we are explanatory flexible in this sense, that might be a virtue of the view, and this might be needed indeed in the intersectional approaches. Finally, regarding methodology, we believe that properly attending to intersectional insight is certainly not inconsequential, and it does require certain kind of sensitivity, which we will refer to as openness. However, this kind of openness does not imply opening a kind of hackneyed Pandora box that is theoretically or practically paralyzing. And I will just briefly comment on this Pandora box in the next slide, but this is in contrast with with another recent proposal by Gastaglis and Madva, in which they believe that this kind of openness might be interpreted in a kind of infinite regress sort of problem, which might be paralyzing and really problematic. This heightened Pandora box is something that the court, in the response to this original Crenshaw case with Black women and General Motors, it's a kind of they used this expression in response to the suit, and they were saying, this is a quote: "The legislative history surrounding Title VII does not indicate that the goal of the statute was to create a new classification of Black women who would have greater standing than, for example, a Black male." And this is the important part. "The prospect of the creation of new classes of protected minorities, governed only by the mathematical principles of permutation and combination, clearly raises the prospect of opening the hackneyed Pandora's box." So in a sense, yes, the prospects, in our view, the prospects of the creation of new classes of protected minorities may raise the prospects of opening a certain kind of box. But we believe that we should be prepared to consider whether, say, lesbian Black women should be one such. So we should be open to all sorts of possibilities in this respect. But the relevant new classes to be specifically protected are not solely governed by what the court says, these mathematical principles of permutation and combination. Rather, they are to be determined a posteriori as those that turn out to interact in specific non-additive ways in the relevant context. So as a conclusion, we believe that intersectionality can be fruitfully understood as a general metaphysical frame where certain specific and interestingly non-additive relations can take place. This general metaphysical frame is specified with the claim that the emergence of experiences in context of discrimination and privilege provides a useful way to articulate such a frame. We believe our account has certain virtues like metaphysical neutrality, explanatory flexibility, and methodological openness. And it is true that these virtues may be attempted by alternatives, so we do not claim that our view is the only one that has these virtues, but still we contend that our emergence account provides proof of concept for what it's worth. So it's a way of illustrating and showing how this can be done with this notion of emergence. Thank you very much.